Give me that acid. Give me that acid.
All right, what's up, everybody? Happy Tuesday. And today we have a very special guest. So welcome, Mary Ellen.
Thank you.
How are you doing today?
I couldn't be better, Alex. I couldn't be better. Thank you.
Yeah, perfect. Good.
Yeah.
Well, welcome to the stream. And I'm sure actually a lot of people in the chat will already know who you are from your many contributions to the community through conference talks and some great resources that you've shared with us. But why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure thing. Yeah. We'll get the disclaimer out of the way. So, the company that I work for just asked me to mention that anything that I say or any opinion I give is strictly my own personal view, and of course, has nothing to do with where I work. Um, So yeah, a little bit about me. I've been in this space for a while. What you might not know about me is I had a career as a television executive for 10 years before I ever got into tech. But it was interesting how tech started infiltrating that job as well. That was a long time ago. So, computers were not ubiquitous at the time. But as they came on the scene, I kind of just gravitated more and more toward that. I worked on two TV shows, Ricky Lake and Joan Rivers. This was a long time ago.
Nice.
And, we started slowly seeing computers come into the office, and everybody had all these questions. And, I just took to them like a duck takes to water. And so I became the computer guru for those TV shows. And then just kind of through that and freelancing on the side, I sort of was able to make it into something more than that. I went to Columbia University and I took their program that they have there. So yeah, that's kind of the beginning.
I don't know a lot about working in television. I did turn down a job at ITV once. I decided
Okay.
to go with a different direction. It was a security job, but it wasn't as interesting as whatever else I was doing at the time. But it sounds very stressful in terms of like you probably have to be able to work well under pressure and meet very tight deadlines, which I'm sure is a big part of what you kind of do in your current career, in working on the blue team side and digital forensics, incident response, and things like that. So, what is the kind of like I suppose my question is what's the main thing that you really enjoy doing in terms of, because when we say like blue team and things like this, it's a very, very broad area. But what really gets you out of bed in the morning?
I love the idea of hunting and hunting for anomalies, hunting for things that shouldn't be there, hunting for things that should be there but aren't there. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I like the whole concept around trying to find vulnerabilities on your network, trying to find misconfigurations.
Yeah.
There's so much out there, right? Um,
It's
it's
kind of
thrilling.
interesting because I feel like we have this whole red team and blue team thing, but to me, I think that's just something that we made up. I feel like good security practitioners actually kind of, as you said, looking at misconfigurations, looking for things that should be there and shouldn't be there, and kind of understanding technology as a whole is actually the important points. And I'm not sure we should have so many labels of like red team and blue team, but that's just my kind of like opinion on the matter. I know it's not the
Yeah,
most popular one, but all
yeah,
good. Yeah.
yeah. Well, yeah, and I think it's important, to keep in mind that if you work at a company that has both of those, um, they must work together. I mean, they can't just
Yeah.
be in their own separate silos because it just you miss. I mean, a lot of companies keep them separate, but you miss so much by not having that collaboration. Um, so
Yeah, I definitely think so. And it is good to specialize, but that doesn't mean you should neglect other areas and working with people who are in other areas as well. I suppose maybe that's why purple teaming became a thing that's being talked about. But so we
yeah,
have, I predicted this question coming up already from Mayant. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Advice for DFIR beginners. Do you want to kind of share how maybe you would get into this? Or I suppose things are a little bit different these days. Things have changed a lot in the last 10 years. So I'm only about 9, 10 years into my career, and AppSec is very different. 9, 10 years ago, trying to become a pen tester or a web app pen tester, and it's very different these days. So what advice do you
yeah.
have for people interested?
Yeah, well, it's funny because I am on LinkedIn a bit, and it was probably about 6 months ago. I saw someone on LinkedIn said, if you ask me for my origin story or you ask me how I got in, it probably wouldn't work for you today, And I thought long and hard about that because I had just I was just on a stream where I was talking about, how I got started, and I had to really think about that. Um, I think it is different, a bit different. There's that tenacity and that not, don't give up that you always, want to keep, and that is evergreen and always stays. But I think today some of the opportunities that I had have changed a little bit, but then there's a lot more opportunity. There's a ton more. Um,
Mm,
I would say one thing, but I have a lot of resources that I put out there and that I try to keep current about, how to get into DFIR. And I keep them on, a little site that I try to keep current.
I have the
Um,
link here ready to go.
yeah,
This
so,
one?
there's, mhm. There's so much out there, and I'll talk a little bit about I'll handpick a few of those sites for DFIR. But I will say that I have a good friend who's an agent, a Hollywood agent, and he told me a long time ago, like, you have to build your brand. You need a platform. So whether you want to do YouTube, whether you want to do a blog, but you need to put yourself out there. And if you're on across social media, you kind of need to keep, the same moniker so that people, you kind of build a brand. And I kind of do. I do that a little bit. I try to do that, and I have a blog that really needs to be maintained. It's kind of old now, but I do try to keep up with other things. But I will say resources for getting into DFIR, and I have tons of them on that link. But to handpick a few of them, I've taken the TCM practical Windows forensics. I think that's the one I took. No, I'm sorry. I might have taken the malware analysis one. But I know that you all have the Windows forensics class.
Yeah.
That's anything that comes out of TCM, and I'm not just saying this. I have never missed a stream of anything that TCM has ever done. Like, that's how big of a believer I am. I mean, I was watching Heath back in the day when he was, it was the pandemic, and he was streaming from what looked like his kitchen, right?
Yeah.
And it's the things that he taught me are just remarkable. So I will say that there's a gal in DFIR, Jessica Hyde, Hexordia. She has her own company, and she puts out on Twitter. She puts out a ton of great resources. So Jessica Hyde. There's a gentleman named Kevin Pagano. And he keeps this Start Me page. If you're familiar with Start Me, it's like
Yeah.
this format. It's like pre-made, it's pre-cooked, pre-baked, whatever. But he keeps a ton of digital forensics resources available, and I can make all these available for you as well. And then there's DFIR Diva. I mean, nobody does it better. I mean, she is just I aspire to be out there and as creative as she is. She's really, really incredible. A couple more I have. I took notes beforehand because I sort of anticipated that this might come up. Magnet Forensics. So Magnet Forensics is a fantastic company, and they have a CTF once a year and a free virtual summit, which is coming up. So if you go to Magnet Forensics, you'll see the CTF is up there, and the virtual summit that you can sign up for free, or if you want to go to in person, if you have the resources. So just a couple more. This week in forensics with Phil Moore. Phil's been around forever. SANS Institute, they have free summits, and I would say every other month, there's like a free summit. It's like a 2-day summit or a 1-day summit, and you can attend virtually. It's free. I have learned tons from that. And then, if you want to get into CTFs, I mean, there's Holiday Hack, which I'm a big fan of. Huntress just did a CTF, which was one of the best CTFs I've ever played. It was hard, but I learned so much. It was, John Hammond works for that
Yeah.
company, and anything he touches, right, is just gold. And they're going to do one again, probably in October, if not before. So yeah, I mean, I could go on and on and on. I mean, I just, it's like I live and breathe this stuff. So like at the end of my workday, as soon as, I have 2 kids, they are priority, but as soon as they have everything they need, I'm all over, like any training, any learning I can do. I'm all over it. CTFs, Meta CTF is another one. Meta CTF, I keep that going. I mean, I'm just always on there.
Sure.
And I
Sure.
met, so yeah, and you can meet friends. Like I literally met in real life, like I met a friend that is now, I consider a good friend, Tawan. I think he's probably watching, but
I can see them in the chat actually. Yeah, there they are.
yeah, he's rising the leaderboard. I mean, so he is looking for work, by the way, in the field, and I can't believe anyone, that folks haven't gobbled him up yet, because he's passed me on the leaderboard. I'm not doing too bad on there. I'm like, I don't know, number 13 or something, or 20. I'm like 20. I don't even know, but I know that it took a long time to get there. And he passed me. He's one of my mentees, and he went flying by me. And I love that. I love when that happens. So I'm sorry, I'm rambling and going on, but
No, it's
get
perfect.
me started, and I can't stop.
There's so many just little things. I love talking to people and just letting them talk, because you're going to have so many interesting points and insights and links, and actually a few of the things you just shared, I've seen before, but not all of them. And sometimes having a good resource or an interesting insight makes a huge difference, especially since you're kind of doing the work, for the community, in terms of you're actually condensing down, you're curating great things, because there's so much content out there these days. It's actually hard to sometimes wade through everything to find something that's really worth your time, because none of us have unlimited time, of course. So yeah, I really appreciate it. I've just dropped all of the links, I think as many as I could find, into the chat. So for those interested, by all means, definitely bookmark and use them as and when. If you had one resource for complete beginners, so let's say I'm soon to graduate from university, maybe I studied something like computer science, or maybe electrical engineering, something reasonably technical. So I'm probably ready to step into something that's also reasonably technical and pick things up quite quickly. That's not to say that somebody who doesn't do a technical degree can't step into the things, but it helps a little bit. I think it's kind of gets you there quickly. What resources would you give them, as to not kind of overwhelm them? What one or two things would you share?
I would give two, and one is John Hammond did he turned it into a playlist. He has a playlist from the Pico CTF 2022 on his channel.
Yeah.
I went through every single one of those, and I learned so much. And this is, I have a forensics background, and I learned a lot more about binary analysis, and so that's one. And then I have to say, Alex, I mean, I've never missed a stream. I think between you and Tiberius, last week, hats off to Tiberius, by the way. I think his stream went close to 3 hours. And, you all get into the minutia, the nitty gritty. You teach, and there've been so many times when I've watched your stream and tried to follow along, and I can't keep up. So I'll have to go back and replay it. No, it's okay. It's me, right? Because you're really good, and I'm just off the street, Joe Schmo, and trying to keep up. And we all have our curves and things that we need to learn. So, and I think it's important to keep that attitude too. That no one can know everything, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so, and what Tiberius streams and what you stream are pretty different, right? So he's got this other skill set that with the Portswager stuff and that stuff, and it's just this incredible free gift that you two give every week, and it's a great place to start. And try Hack Me as well. I'll throw that in there, because I think they're a little easier than Hack the Box, just a tiny bit. But
I definitely think it's more accessible resource for beginners, especially with the paths and the guided challenges and learning. Yeah, 100%. But I also have an opinion on this, where I think people should spend a little bit more time learning and following guided stuff, and a little bit less time doing challenges, just because given unlimited time, yes, being challenged is a great way to learn. But given limited time, you actually want to learn a lot more, and you shouldn't neglect putting that into practice. But I'm kind of a fan of 80% try Hack Me, 20% Hack the Box, and then maybe after a few years, more Hack the Box and less try Hack Me. But that's just my opinion. But that's not to say that Hack the Box isn't good. It's a great resource, but but we all have stuff to do. So,
Well,
yeah,
and to that point with Meta CTF, which I'm a big fan of, and I like I say, I have a subscription there and I keep it going, and that's one of my favorite go-tos. But Tawan and I have talked a lot about this, that you can't, you can't, and I know you've mentioned this too. You kind of need to set limits because you'll just spin your
yeah,
wheels. And if you're not learning, when you stop learning and you're just stuck, you have to put it away and come back, right? Um,
yeah,
and it's funny because sometimes I'll get stuck and then I'll go play one of your videos and I'll be like, okay, because it was a web challenge. And now I've learned some more web skills, web application skills. And then I'll go back and I'll try it again. So, yeah, there's
yeah.
that. Like, if you get too stuck, you're not learning and then you're
Yeah,
wasting.
exactly. Yeah, it's good to challenge, but you don't want to. Spending one whole day to learn a small thing or a small trick is not efficient, right?
Exactly.
But I'm also a big believer in kind of building stuff yourself, which again you kind of mentioned earlier, and then I so kind of said, hey, yeah, I also think that people should look to understand technology. I did see one of your conference talks, which was on building a malware lab, and how would you get? So for me, somebody who doesn't know anything about malware. Would you recommend going straight in building a lab, or would you more recommend kind of reading resources, looking at other people's maybe write-ups and techniques, and then trying to mimic them? How would you get started in mm, malware and reverse engineering?
Well, that's a great question. So it is kind of like the cart before the horse. Like if you have the lab, but
Mm,
the problem you're going to face is you're going to need a lab if you're going to be looking at live samples, right? So, um, yeah, and there's also a lot of the people are talking. A lot of folks in the space are talking about moving the lab to the cloud. Now, I haven't done that yet,
yeah,
um, but I use VirtualBox just because it's free and it's got its quirks and its issues. But I would say you kind of do need to build something virtual to keep those samples from, escaping and getting out.
yeah,
Unless you have a dedicated, just a dedicated machine that you don't mind wiping. Maybe you use like, what's that old software we used to use when I was at help desk, like ICE or something, where you just bring it right back to its pristine
yeah.
state, right? Like with a reboot. Um, but you do that with VMs as well. So, um,
That makes sense. And do you have any kind of like opinions on more modern dynamic analysis as well? Because I know there are more and more tools that are doing more dynamic analysis, and there is, of course, the little bit of cat and mouse between like your sandbox evasion, where the sandbox might only run for 20 minutes, so your payload actually only triggers at 21 minutes, for example. Or the best one I think I saw was the motion detection on the iPhone, where the sandboxes didn't have motion. Whereas when a user is holding their phone, there's motion input, so it could detect that to
interesting.
tell whether it's in a sandbox or not. But
Hmm.
do you have any thoughts on is static analysis kind of becoming less popular, and maybe is dynamic analysis becoming more powerful? I'm not really in the space, so I'm kind of just guessing from sometimes the news that I read in this area. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's interesting. I mean, I see samples every day that I, as part of what I do that I want to look at. And I've noticed too that I'm not the only one that does both. Like I have team members as well, and they'll be like, here's what it looked like on static, here's what it looked like on dynamic. So I don't think either is dead. I think
okay,
they both are very important because you really kind of need to rip it open and see you know, behind the curtain, everything, right?
yeah.
But then you need to run it and you need to see what it does when it actually runs, right? So,
Yeah, I think that makes sense because you'd be, you know, it'd be silly to kind of like leave one, like half of your techniques behind, if that makes sense, if it gives you even just one valuable insights. Do you have any particular tools that you use for malware analysis?
oh my goodness, it's endless. I do, and I'm always adding more. Oh, geez, I mean, I would say rather than list them all, I would. It's hard
There's
to say.
actually we have of course your site as well does have a malware analysis section, so maybe I can
Yeah.
share this. If you come into home and then you come to tools, and then under malware analysis we have a load of stuff, massive great spreadsheet which Yeah, 100 and let's say 182 rows. So if you need malware analysis tools, maybe this is the place to go, I think.
Right, right. Well, I will call out Ghidra. So Ghidra is big right now. From what I try to keep myself out there, and everything that I've been seeing, Ghidra is they just put out, I think, something a week or so ago, and now I think they're supporting Rust as well. And so that's a big one. But then there's IDA Pro free.
Yeah,
There's just so many. I mean, yeah.
that makes sense. Okay, awesome. So I also wanted to ask you about, because you mentioned about building your personal brand and things like that. How would you approach, if you're in the shoes of, let's say you have a certification or you have 1 to 2 years of experience, how would you approach kind of like job search and personal brand? Do you rely a lot on networking, or do you kind of, yeah, I suppose open question. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think networking is essential. I mean, I think it's just my personal opinion, but I think it's going to be almost impossible to find a job if you don't know someone who works at that company. Um, Not impossible. Maybe I'm being too extreme, but all I can say is if you have a personal network, it's going to be so helpful when you're looking for work. Um, and one of the ways that you can build that is by giving back. I think that, this community gives so many things away for free that sometimes we can get caught up with all the free stuff and not give back. And
Yeah.
it's hard to find time to give back. But if you can start like a blog or a little YouTube channel. Like I think you mentioned last week, my DFIR, right? That guy. I remember I was watching him, and it wasn't that long ago. He exploded. He had like 100 followers, and now look at him, right?
Yeah.
And he's just this guy who's in DFIR, and I mean, look what he's done. And so, and not everybody is a YouTube person. It's not easy to put yourself out there on camera,
Yeah.
but yeah, like blogging or even GitHub, like, if I'm looking at resumes and thinking about expanding the team, I want to see their GitHub, right?
Yeah.
So anything you can put out there about yourself is great. And one way to do that, again, is by helping others and putting helpful resources out there. Maybe it's just a cheat sheet, right? But yeah.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And there are so many different ways to contribute, like do what suits you, I think. Like as you say, if you don't want to put your face out on YouTube, you can write blogs, you can build tools. There are so many open source projects. And looks like a few people just missed the link. So I'm just gonna pop it in the chat once again. So there you go. If you missed it the first time round, it's in the chat again. So all good. All right, so I can see a bunch of questions coming in from you guys as well. So instead of being greedy and kind of asking you all the questions that I want to ask you, I'm just gonna run down and take a look. So I suppose, especially if you're in digital forensics, you probably actually have some really interesting insights into the current kind of like cybercrime economy. I suppose this is like maybe looking at what current threat actors are leaning more towards. Maybe if there are any trends that you have any insights on. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Tough question.
It's a pretty sad affair, isn't it? It's employment security for many of us for many years to come, unfortunately. Um, it is, whoa. I mean, and it's interesting. Over the weekend, um, I had an email, a rather urgent email from my martial arts instructor, and he said, "I think I just got hacked." I thought that someone was commenting on our Facebook, and I clicked on the link because they said that he said I had just posted something, and there was a comment saying that, that it was going to be taken down and that, it was offensive. And I clicked on it and I gave them my information. And he said, I caught myself and I turned around quickly and I reset everything, and he did it so quickly that I think he saved the account. But there's just like it's everywhere. I mean, phishing is this is the vector, right? We all know it's BEC and phishing. This is how they get in, 9 times out of 10. Now, the latest
Yeah.
hack that, of course, that everybody's talking about was not phishing. It was, I think, a misconfiguration. But 9 times out of 10, it is phishing, and they're getting more and more and more advanced with that. And the whole thing about AI helping to write phishing emails. I mean, I suppose it's helpful, right?
Yeah.
There aren't as many typos anymore. You could, it's harder and harder to see them. But it's a great question, Alex. I mean, it's the cybercrime economy. So Ronnie, I Heart Malware. His last name starts with a T, but I won't even try to pronounce it. But he was just on Darknet Diaries talking about pig butchering, which is a terrible term, but it's he went into why it's called that, and I thought it was very interesting. And now I don't cringe so much when I hear it because it makes sense. But all about these romance scams, and that's a whole nother
Yeah.
piece of cybercrime, right? But Ronnie's a good person to he's clued in with the cybercrime economy.
Yeah.
And so, he's out there on social media. So if you can find him as well, um, he puts out very good content. So,
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, definitely. I have to ask, what martial arts do you practice?
well, Taekwondo,
Okay.
uh, and I took a little bit of a break. So he and I were the instructor and I were just talking about, we're going to meet next week. I've taken a bit of a break since about November, and I don't know. I don't know. I just kind of feel like maybe I'll go back, but maybe not. So it's a struggle. It's a struggle, and I have to work through that.
Yeah.
Um, so
I'm
we're gonna
kind
get
of the same with my Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I'm very on and off. Although I did kind of move around a lot, and it's sometimes hard to kind of find a new school to, get to know people again and join. But every time I go back, I do enjoy it. So
Well, that's
yeah.
it. That's it. And I've stopped before and then going back, but then I feel so guilty, right? So it's like, and that's one reason why we're going to get together, because he does not want me to feel that way,
Yeah.
and he mentioned a training partner who had taken a break and just came back recently. I know because I had coffee with them back in December, and they just got their black belt. So a couple belt. Well, I'm a brown belt, right? So the next is black, but
Sure.
there's a
Yeah.
couple tests in between there that you have to take. There's like different types of brown belts.
Yeah.
So we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, nice. Awesome. It's good to have some stuff on the side as well. Just good. Generally speaking, I'm a big believer in having be passionate about something, but don't neglect your whole life.
Yeah.
I think is really, really important. And
Yeah.
there are very few people who can do that successfully, who can just dedicate their life to one singular thing, and a lot of the time it looks like, on social media, it looks like I basically do like 16 hours a day of web hacking, but I honestly I don't so
Yeah.
because that's all I kind of really talk about. But yeah, definitely balance and is really, really important. So
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because I think it was just your last stream that you mentioned how you go to the gym. You get up and you hack for like 2 hours, and then you go to the gym for like, a couple of hours
yeah,
or whatever. And I thought that was interesting because,
excuse me.
yeah, I didn't know that. I sort of thought, wow, he just never leaves the terminal.
Yeah, I just sit
But
here and I get up to feed the cats and that's it, and then come back.
But yeah,
Yeah.
I get out there myself every day for at least an hour. We live on a mountain, so
Ah, I'm jealous.
I either run halfway or walk part. It's a walk run thing, but for an hour every day, I at least get out, and I have to mentally. I just
Yeah.
have to, and physically as well. I mean, you kind of have to just try to stay as fit as you can. So
It actually makes you better at what you do as well, because it's what your brain needs, really.
yeah,
And there's tons of neuroscience and all sorts of research to back it up. So it's kind of
yeah,
like, if you want to be a better hacker, don't just do hacking. Also think about, good sleep and lots of other things. So
yeah, for sure.
this is an interesting question, and once again, kind of like cycles back to I don't really believe in blue team, red team. I kind of believe in, understanding technology. Do you have any opinions on digital forensics, incident response within the context of a red team? And I think more on the lines of having a DFIR specialist as part of a red team, because red team's usually made up of multiple specialists, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I think, I was on Red Team for a year, and I definitely, those DFIR skills came in handy,
Yeah.
for sure. And OSINT as well. OSINT is a big part of it too. You
Somewhat
spend like,
overlooked OSINT, I think, often.
yeah, yeah, because you spend like your first week sometimes doing nothing but recon, right? And a big part of that recon is OSINT. Um, you'd be amazing, like the cameras that are out there online that like if your target is a particular building, you might be able to find a webcam that's public, that's just, exposed and streaming people that come and go. But is DFIR in Red Team? Yeah, absolutely. I think it absolutely is a part of it for sure.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, good. I always have this story of one of the earlier pen tests in my career, and I'd found this webcam connected to the network, got in with default credentials, and then I was looking at it, and I was like, "Huh, I didn't know we had a safe." And turns out that the company that I was working for used to have a safe, and then what had happened was it had been bought by another company, but all of the webcams and some other devices were still connected to the company network. And so I was sitting there watching the employees of another company load and unload, pallets of cash and things like this, because they were
Oh
obviously
my gosh.
wholesale or trading or whatever. Um, uh, and was like, that's probably a finding. So
Yeah.
yeah, one of my early pen tests was quite fun. Was quite an interesting thing to
Funny.
find. But yeah, I
Wow.
think stuff like that you can easily find. Of course, sometimes external facing as well. In this case, it was connected to the internal network, so you had to be on the internal network. But it's not so good that their devices are connected to another company's network.
Yeah.
But yeah. Yeah, all good. Let me just check in with the chat again as well. See how you're all doing. I can see lots of great comments.
I think I saw one flyby that I hadn't mentioned is KC7. Yeah, KC7 is, you can just put it into Google and you'll find KC, the letter K, the letter C, and the number 7. Um, you know, so they've been around, I think, for at least a year, maybe more. But it's like the skill set that you find there is like real world. Like, show me a huge conglomerate, company that isn't using Microsoft, right? So, I mean, you need, as a defender, you need to know how to query, and and they make it fun. Oh, there it is. Yeah. So, yeah, Tawan. Yeah. So I know Tawan is big into that. So, and that's not how we met, but it was funny that we talked about that like we'd both done. I think KC7 offered like a free CTF or something at a SANS summit that was free, and we were both in it, playing it, but didn't know each other at the time.
I see. I see.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I
Yeah.
think I
Awesome.
commented on Twitter or X or whatever back in the day when that was happening, that I thought it was just such an incredible resource. So yeah, so that's another one. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great resource. And actually, kind of like maybe an hour ago, my opinion on blue team resources was like, there aren't that many good resources. But now suddenly, I feel like I've just been introduced to a ton of great resources. So this is really great, especially for me because I like to try and have a broad scope in terms of my cybersecurity knowledge. So I'll definitely be following up on a few of these. It's great. So this is the KC7. Is it? So it's real world cases that you can learn from. Is that
Yeah,
the
I mean,
case?
yeah, they give you a data set, right? And I think the data set
Okay.
is,
Yeah.
yeah, is probably, compiled not from probably a real incident per se, but like it'll mimic a real world incident.
Right. Right. I see. I
And
see. That makes sense. Yeah, I saw that some companies, I think off the top of my head, don't quote me, I think it was Obsidian. They were publishing their pen test results quite recently, which is quite interesting. So again, if you're interested in learning about pen testing, you can go in, you can have a look at this report, see what they found, see how the report was made. And honestly, I think more companies should publish the information that they have because it's going to benefit the community hugely. And there's not really any drawbacks to it. I mean, as long as you fix the issues before you publish your report,
Right,
you know, and
right.
then you're all good. But yeah, I think that makes sense. There's a question here from Jill. Sorry if it's Gil or Jill. So how can a beginner know if a malware can escape from your VM? Do you take any extra precautions outside of your, putting things inside of a VM? Do you take extra precautions to save from things like VM escapes, which are kind of few and far between unless you're running old versions, but it does happen.
Yeah, yeah, it's in the networking end of it, yes. You want to configure the back end, and there are ways that you can do that. If you watch the video actually that I put out, it goes through all of that. There are a couple settings that you want to make sure so that your samples don't escape. I mean, and nothing's fail-proof, right? There's no magic wand that you're going to say, okay, this one can't get out. I mean, just stuff happens. But there are a couple settings in either VirtualBox or the other virtual platforms that you can set that'll help you with that. So
Yeah, it makes sense. I'm just finding I've got the link to your video. So it's the how to build a free malware lab, the KringleCon one. Is that the one?
yeah, the
Yeah,
KringleCon,
let me
yeah,
drop that into. That's the one
yeah,
that I've watched as well. So it's definitely worth checking out for sure. I tend to keep my stuff. So I migrated everything from running VMware on my host. I bought like a mini PC, a reasonably powerful mini, and then put Proxmox on it. Moved
okay,
all of my VMs to there, and then everything is so easy to kind of spin up and destroy and things like that. And then I don't know, maybe I should be more careful with my home network. But to be fair, I don't. It's like once in a blue moon that I actually handle malware and things like that. So
yeah.
most of the time I'm just configuring things myself and attacking them and doing stuff like that. So my job is low risk for sure. So all good. Um, Let me check back in. There are so many great questions. So let's see. Oh, okay. One from Chameleon, who is of course a regular viewer. Which is like, okay, so how could we improve our streams? What would you like to see more in future from TCM?
Uh, that's a great question.
More blue team stuff.
Yeah. Um, I like when you go through the different either the platforms, whatever it is. But I like when they're the free ones, right? Because I can't always follow along if I don't have the subscription one.
Yeah.
Um, so that's just like, I guess, not really like something new, but like something, just a tweak that I would suggest, but to make them all a little bit more accessible. But I think it's fun to have guests on, right? Like maybe every once a month, maybe,
Yeah.
have a guest on. But I don't know, it's like if it ain't broken, don't fix it.
Yeah, I suppose so.
I think it's pretty darn good the way it is. Between, like I said, between you and Tibbs now, Tibbs has just been such a fantastic addition to the team that it's just like double whammy. It's like it's
Yeah.
really good. It's all good stuff.
We kind of we got lucky. I hope Tibbs doesn't mind me sharing, but I was talking to him. I think he was a guest on my stream, and then afterwards he was like, a TCM hiring. And I was like, let me check in with Heath. And then Heath was like, yes. And then a few weeks later, Tibbs joins TCM Security. So once again, kind of like networking and also being open to new opportunities and just giving back to the community, these kinds of opportunities arise, and we're obviously really happy to have Tibbs on. I'm always learning a ton from him as well, and even though I have a reasonable background in application security, there's still always new things to learn, interesting insights, interesting techniques, and yeah, he's just a treasure trove of information. So yeah,
For
it's
sure.
really, really great.
And also, yeah, internships, right, is another
Yeah.
way to get great real world experience, right? And if if you're turned down by a major organization for their summer internship or whatever, don't let that stop you. Find a nonprofit. I can guarantee you that there are nonprofits in your little town, wherever you are, that wouldn't, or a church that is not going to turn down free help, right?
Yeah.
So.
I think there was a question. I might have skipped past it on how to get an internship, but I think you've answered it nicely there. Where don't just look at the internships you can see on the internet. Yeah, be proactive. And so when I was working at Rakuten, for example, we took on interns, but to be honest, we'd get hundreds and hundreds of letters. So it's actually very difficult to get an internship at a large company. And almost all of the interns we had were students that we knew from our boot camp. So I was running a cybersecurity boot camp at Tokyo Institute of Technology, and then basically all of our interns came from there. Even though technically it was like an open position, like we had to advertise it, but of course we're going to choose students who showed enthusiasm and we got on well with during the boot camp. So yeah, it's definitely, again, networking is super important, of course. I did see a question that I wanted to flag, but it's disappeared. Where are we?
If you remember what it was, just tell me.
I can't remember. I remember thinking it's a good question, but I can't actually remember what it was.
Okay.
I have this like single thing. So if I'm concentrating on something and somebody talks to me, I have like a buffer, and then things go into the buffer, and about 20 seconds later it gets processed. So I'm not very good at like multitasking the different things, but it's all good. Can we talk about the controversial, super popular topic of how does AI affect the field of cybersecurity? What are your thoughts in this?
Oh my gosh. I've heard it's going to take away our jobs. And then I've heard, Tibbs, I think last week was like, don't worry about it. It's crap. It's not, it's not a threat at all. It's terrible. I can tell you that it's helpful for me as an analyst. If I'm struggling with something, if I'm looking at a piece of code and I'm not sure what it is, or what it does, I can put it into, one of the many, I like Bing too. I like Bing AI. I have to say that Microsoft AI, I enjoy that too, because I'm still on the free version of ChatGPT. So it's not quite as good as the paid version.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I have this thing, I figure if Bing is Microsoft, right, and it's a Microsoft piece of code I'm looking at, let me throw it in there. As long as it's not proprietary, right, I can throw it in there and get a feel for what it's doing. So I think how it affects our field is that it enhances our field. I think it's another tool in your tool chest. And I think it's a fantastic tool. And I would approach it that way.
It's an enabler, really, and I'm 100% agree with you. I actually do a lot of my troubleshooting with my code. I'm like, hey, I've got this error. What's the deal? Because I'm using some library that maybe I haven't used it before, and it's gonna point me in the right direction. So as an assistant, I think that's what Heath also kind of said. He's like, AI is a great assistant, but it's not going to replace people. And yeah, from the prompts that I give it, and I see that all the time. I have to correct things that it says and things like this.
And actually, well, speaking of that, not to cut you off, but when you said Heath with AI, I think Heath just put out a class in AI.
Yes, coding with AI. Yeah.
I want to take that. That looks good.
Yeah. I think it's definitely like I mean, it's perfect. it's going to speed up your workflow. It's going to help you find things that you maybe haven't thought about. And like I said before, because I build a lot of CTFs and stuff. I work with a lot of libraries that I know the library is vulnerable, but I actually have no idea what the library does and how to implement it. So again, it really helps with stuff like that. So I haven't done the course yet. I watched the first 2 videos, but it's in my backlog of things to do. But yeah, it should be a good one for sure.
There's
sorry,
one more
go ahead.
resource you reminded me about that I failed, and I would never forgive myself if I did not mention. Black Hills Information Security, the anti-siphon training, right?
Yeah.
They offer pay what you can, which is, pretty much what TCM is doing, like, $29 a month. I mean, come on. I mean, that's like accessible. I mean, even if you're struggling, that is something, you can seriously look at what we spend on Starbucks. I mean, seriously, I wanted to save money, last year, and I stopped going to Starbucks for a while, and I saved the money that I needed to save.
Yeah.
But yeah, so they have Anti-Siphon puts out videos as well on YouTube. They do a live video, 1 or 2 videos every week, training type videos. They offer pay what you can training. And they have a summit coming up. Their summits are always lots of fun because there's always a meta CTF involved for free.
Yeah.
This is all free. So in March, check it out. Black Hills is going to be doing another free summit. Again, just another great resource to have that
Yeah, for sure.
did not want to fail to mention. So
Yeah, I'm actually a big fan of the Black Hills blog posts as well. So because I mean, part of my job is I do some blog posts, but I always read the Black Hills ones, and I think, God, these are really good blog posts. How do I get mine to be as good as this? Because they're always very technical, very insightful, and pretty thorough as well. So
and
yeah,
Jason, and Jason Blanchard comes out of there as well, and he does that weekly Tuesdays at 10 a.m. I don't think he went on today, but he does a live Twitch stream on how to find a job in cybersecurity.
Ah,
Let me tell you, that is one of the most powerful streams you will ever watch. Every week, live. You can go back and play them. So he goes by Banjo Crashland, and if you're looking for work, he is the person to go to.
Let me. I don't think I'm following this on Twitch, so I'm. All right, here we go. I'm following. And let me pop the link into the chat as well for everybody else. I think there aren't enough streamers in our field. Twitch is full of games and full of some questionable stuff, but there's not enough cybersecurity streamers. And I think a lot of the time streaming's quite tough because obviously, like, you don't want to, like, I had this conversation with Tibbs. He's like, we were like, our biggest fear is to say something that's like, like completely wrong or something stupid, and then like being called out on social media, and everybody's like, oh no, you're an idiot, you don't know this or that or the other, especially if you're kind of like covering a variety of topics. But really, I think like 99.9% of everybody in the community is so supportive and so helpful. So if there's anybody in the chat who was like, I want to do YouTube, or I want to do streaming or something like this, and it's scary for all of us. So don't, just know that we're all in the same boat.
It is. I follow Dave Kennedy, who's another great, just a big great, in our space, just gives back so much. And he mentioned, this was like back in November or something on his feed. He's very active on Twitter, and he mentioned that he had gone to the grocery store and there was an elderly person in front of him that was having trouble paying or forgot their wallet, whatever it was, and he just picked up the tab. And he mentioned this, and everyone was like, that is so incredible. Like, wow, thank you for that. We all strive to be that. There's this one person that got on and said some nasty comment about it. Like, why are you bringing this up on here? You're making yourself look like you're a hero or something. It's like, there's always going to be that. But it's just unfortunate. And I thought the way he handled it was so professional. He was just like, to the person, he was kind of like, I'm really sorry that you feel that way. That's really sad, and he went on, but I thought, wow, I mean, I take things very personally, and that would have really been hard for me to take. But
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, when I started at TCM, especially when I started doing the YouTube videos, a lot of the comments are like, "Where's Heath?" and things like this, and
oh,
that's kind of like, yeah. But I think after a little while, you do get a bit of a thicker skin. But I think that's just part of being on the internet. Unfortunately, the
yeah.
downside of and oh yeah, everybody. I actually quite like this one. Adrian says, "Are you Heath's son/brother?" Which is quite amusing. So yeah, all
Funny.
good. So we probably have time for one or two more questions, but also I wanted to talk to you about soft skills and especially I think because we were chatting a little bit before the stream, and you were talking about, hey, things like leadership skills and qualities actually happen at every level. You don't have to be a C-level exec to be a leader, for example. So, yeah, I kind of want to get your hot take on that before we wrap up the session.
Yeah, yeah. And on my resources page that you put out there, I do have a whole section on leadership versus management. They're not always the same. You can be a manager and not be a leader.
Yeah,
And I think it's so important. It's funny. We were talking about Black Hills. So Kip Boyle puts out an anti-slaving class that I just started taking over the weekend about building a team and how to be a better leader. And it's just you lead by example. And that class is phenomenal. It's phenomenal. I'm learning so much. I have played it and replayed it like so many of I'm like almost through it already. But yeah, so I, lead by example, right? Nobody wants to work. The cliche we've all heard. People don't leave the job; they leave the manager. Well, that's true. That's
yeah,
true. 9 times out of 10, that's true. Sometimes it's just a better opportunity, and the company can't even come close, right? So
yeah,
there's that. But yeah, no matter what your title is, there's no reason why you can't exhibit leadership qualities, no matter what. And I would argue that if you exhibit leadership qualities and you're an intern, when it comes time to hire people, guess what? Guess who they're going to remember, right?
yeah.
Um, so yeah,
I think it's definitely good advice. And actually, as somebody who's also hired a lot of interns and things like that, I think I hire not entirely on gut feeling, but honestly, like the people who come in and take responsibility for their work and seek advice and aren't scared to try things and interact with the team and have good soft skills. Those are the people that I generally end up hiring. It's not always the case, but yeah, that's definitely a big factor, if that makes sense.
yeah,
Yeah, for
for
sure.
sure.
All right, let's take one one last question. I'm just scrolling past the obviously I'm Heath's brother chat, and let's keep coming down. So thanks for posting the link, by the way. So if anybody in the chat wants to follow Mary Ellen's contributions, insights, anything, I mean, it's a big link tree. There's a ton of stuff to go through. And then, of course, we have the link to the DFIR links as well, which again is a treasure trove of information. So that's definitely worth bookmarking. But let's take one question before we close up the stream. Let's find a good one. Just scrolling down.
Thank you, and
Um,
and thank you, Adriana. Thank you so much. I see that in there. That's kind of you. Thank you.
yeah, always here supporting the stream. So
Thanks.
I'm not going to say unsung here because every week I'm like, Adriana, you're always great. But so the community appreciates you, of course.
For sure.
But yeah, always can be tricky working behind the scenes. So being able to practice your DFIR skills while still having good work-life balance, how much time and how do you keep your skills fresh and do new challenges and CTFs, etc.? I suppose like the essence of this, I get, is that there's always more to learn and things to catch up on. But how do you kind of approach learning new things in balance with your day job and your life and martial arts and kids and everything else?
Yeah, it's a lot. Fortunately, I love it, right? I just love it. It's a big hobby. So it's one of my favorite things to do, to learn. Um, so I just try to block out at least an hour in the evening. The kids have classes, I'm constantly shuttling them all over creation. Um, but, and sometimes if, I have to wait for them while they're in like an hour class or 45-minute class, I have my phone. I can stream
Yeah.
YouTube videos, right? So I try to fold learning into, wherever I can. Like when I mentioned that I hike every day for an hour. Well, guess what I'm listening to?
Yeah.
I'm streaming my favorite YouTubers, while I hike. Um, and then sometimes I find myself coming back right afterward and I'm like, I have to write down like 3 things I just learned. And then after work, I try to go through and practice those.
Yeah.
Um, I
That's
find it very interesting. So maybe that's just me.
That's really great because my experience. So when I was commuting in Tokyo, for example, and in previous jobs and things, I would use my commute time kind of as study time, but not serious study time, but more like relaxing study time. So yeah, I would listen to podcasts or catch up on a YouTube or something. But I think like almost everybody on the train, for example, is watching things like Netflix and stuff like that. And I think Netflix is okay. You do need downtime and you do need time to relax, but especially like in the morning for me, because I'm more of a morning person. If I had an hour commute, that's kind of like an hour of like prime brain time. Like my
Yep.
brain is working in the morning, and that's a great time to learn. And so what I started doing for me personally, and a lot of people have a flip of this, so they, the opposite end. But I tend to get up early and I study and then I do work. And then later in the evening, I can have my chill, relaxed time. And obviously some people get up later, do their work, and then, maybe they'll relax throughout the day, but then they'll study in the evening, which is totally fine as well. But making use of time that you have, not everybody, but I think most of us have uh, time to spare that we could be a little bit more efficient with, I think, which is always
Well,
good. So
and I benefit from that as well, being on the East Coast. When I was commuting in for a SOC position every day, I would be on the train. It was like a 45-minute commute, and I'd be on the train, and EMEA was going strong overnight, and so I already knew the latest threats I was going to see coming into the SOC that day because of folks like you in the
yeah.
UK who were already seeing them and putting them out there. So yeah, there's that too.
Yeah, it's very cool. Yeah, the time zones are always an interesting one. I actually quite like being in the early time zone because I get like the bulk of my work done, and then everybody else comes on the line. I always feel a bit more like, I don't know, just less stressed with the day because it's kind of nice to have no notifications. And to be honest, when I'm working it anyway, I have like the Windows. I switch off notifications, and I have my phone has like a silent mode anyway, so
Yeah.
I'm very much I only focus on one thing at once until my alarm goes off.
Yeah.
But yeah, it doesn't work for everybody, but it works for me. So and I think we're just coming up to the hour. So it's really great to have you on, of course, and thank you for sharing so many resources. I'm heading to Spain this weekend, and I have a few hours on the flight, so I'll be checking out some of these resources, and also, of course, sharing them because I get asked a lot about stuff like this in on live stream, and I'm not like, I'm not the blue team person to give really good advice, but hopefully, now that you've given me some great resources, I can then also share them in the future to the community
Thank
as
you.
well through our future live streams. So
Thank
yeah,
you.
it's been great. Thank you so much
Thank you.
for spending the time with us, and thanks to
Thank
everybody
you.
in the chat. And we'll be live tomorrow with Tibbs, and that's yeah. Thanks everybody. Have a
Thank you
great
so
rest of the
much.
day.
Thank you.